Okay. All right. So this is the home screen on my iPhone. One quick thing that I'm going to mention is that I am currently running Apple iOS 13. So if you do not have your operating system on your phone updated and you don't update regularly, especially when we get to editing your images in the Photos app, things are not going to look the same. So I just want to go ahead and call that out because I'm sure that it'll come up. It usually comes up in my in-person classes. So I'm just going to open up my camera app really quickly. On my screen, it's the top right-hand corner of the screen. This is just the basic camera app that comes with your phone. I'm going to show you kind of up front one of my all-time favorite kind of pro tips for using this, and it lives in your settings. So I'm actually going to flip out of this really quickly, and I'm going to go to my settings app. So this is your kind of the gear icon on my screen. It's the second row farthest to the left. So it's where all of your kind of settings for your phone live. And if I scroll down to the camera section, so it's kind of a little ways down there, and it's got kind of its own section. So you've got photos and camera kind of in the same place. And if I go to camera, there is a switch at the very top, and I'm going to turn it on. It's for the grid. So it's your second option. And when I turn the grid on and go back to my camera app, I now have, if you can see it, you can see it a little bit better on the camera, the kind of black camera. You get these really thin, pale white lines that overlay on your display. I don't find them to be distracting, and I keep this on all the time because I cannot take a straight photo to save my life. I don't know if I am personally crooked or what, but I cannot take a straight photo. So having these kind of guidelines help me to take straight photos, especially if I'm working with an interior or and I want my kind of walls and corners of the wall to be straight, or if I'm photographing an object and I want to make sure that my horizon is straight or that things are kind of straight and lined up. And if you are into photography, these are classic rule of thirds lines. So you can use these lines to create compositions within your camera, so that I can, use the little intersection points to create different compositions, so that I am creating and lining things up according to the rule of thirds, for more interesting compositions. Does everybody follow me so far? This is very strange, teaching to basically an audience that I can't see and get kind of reactions from. So this is new for me. Uh, Again, this is in your settings app under the camera section, and it's that grid toggle. And I find that to be super, super helpful. It will stay on until you go back and turn it off. And again, I keep it on all the time. That is just kind of how I like to roll. All right. So yeah, Lena says that she's already got that turned on her phone, and that is really smart. It's one of my favorite kind of secret things. And it's not on by default. I don't know why it's not on by default. I guess not everybody likes having grid overlays on their phone. All right, so how I'm going to do this, we're just going to go over the camera app. And the way that I tend to do this is we're just going to kind of go over all of the different buttons and options in starting with the top left hand corner and going clockwise around. We're going to go over each one of the functions. Before we do that, there are a couple of things that I want to point out before I forget. And if you already know this, great. If not, it's super helpful. Anytime you tap anywhere on the little preview of what you're taking a picture of, so if I tap on this little toy's face, it is going to focus and expose on that point. I can also tap on this other item and it will switch the exposure and the focus to that item. I can tap kind of here in the foreground and it's going to try and adjust for focus and try and focus and expose there. So anytime you need to make sure that your focus is spot on, you can tap anywhere on the screen to do that. Also, if you're taking a portrait of an actual person that's not a toy, the Apple iPhone will kind of put little yellow boxes over the faces using facial recognition and automatically try and focus for faces, which is super useful. And there's no way to kind of like turn that off that I know of. I think that's just the default. One thing that I do want to point out that is super, super, super handy, useful, especially if you're photographing like products or things that are stationary and things that might kind of be tricky, like this black camera. I'm not getting a whole lot of detail with it because it's dark. Do you see how when I tap on the screen, there's a little sunshine that kind of shows up next to that box? If I place my finger on that sunshine and immediately start to swipe up, it is going to adjust and brighten the overall exposure. And if I swipe down, it is going to darken the overall exposure. And that will kind of stay that way until I push the shutter button and it's going to take a picture. And then it'll kind of refocus and kind of, so it'll redo the autofocus and redo the auto exposure from the kind of custom exposure that I just set. And again, you just kind of tap on where you want and then place your finger over that sunshine and swipe up and down to adjust the thing. And you have to kind of put your finger on the sunshine and immediately start moving up and immediately start moving down. There's not a whole lot of, you don't have to kind of push and hold. And if you push and hold, this is what's going to happen. So I can bring this up, and if I kind of long press, do you see how that pulsed? And now up at the top of my screen it says in big yellow AEAF lock. Now if I swipe this sunshine up and down and take a picture, it is going to lock in that exposure and lock in that focus point until I change it. So it's going to stay just like that until I come in and change it again. And I still have that badge up at the top that says AEAF lock. And just so you know, if you hate acronyms like me, AE stands for auto exposure and AF stands for autofocus. So it's basically locking in the focus that you choose and the exposure that you choose rather than doing the auto. And again, if I tap anywhere else on the screen, it gets rid of that. So anytime you kind of dial that in, if you do it by accident, I do it by accident all the time, just tap at another point on the screen and it will release that lock. The yellow badge goes away at the top and you're good to kind of go again. Okay? I wish there was a way to, like, for people to raise their hands. There might be. Everybody following so far? Awesome. Lena says she is, so that's cool. Yeah, if you guys, I have my chat box open right here on my screen. If you guys want to open up your chat and just give me I don't know, a quick thumbs up or an emoji or something. Okay, so that is um, kind of selecting your exposure and focus, learning how to select your your focus and exposure lock, and doing your exposure compensation, where you are choosing your own kind of exposure. Cool. All right, so starting at the top left, looking at our little icons, we have got a lightning bolt. And on mine, it's a lightning bolt with a strike through, like a slash going through it. If I tap this, it is going to expand my options for flash, my flash settings. By default, your flash setting is set to auto. I have mine, and just so you can see, any text in the iPhone that is yellow is the active setting. So the word off on my screen is colored yellow. So that means that is the active setting for the flash for me. And that is because personally, I really dislike, and for those of you who are new to me, and you don't know me well yet, I'm kind of a control freak, maybe a little bit. And I don't like for things to happen when I haven't kind of expressly decided for it to happen. So I generally speaking have the flash set to off no matter what. If I tap on, that means that every time that I push the shutter, the flash is going to fire. And then if I have it set to auto, it is only going to fire when it thinks it needs it, which will be kind of low light situations and that sort of thing. And I will give Apple this. On the new phones, and just so you know, I'm on the iPhone 10s or the XS, whatever you want to say it is. On the newer phones, their flash has gotten a lot better. So it feels a little bit more natural and not quite so terrible. I, again, I just like it off. That's just me. And I will turn it on when I need it, which is usually for kind of snapshots at night and that kind of thing, or for a little bit of fill flash, which in this case, since I'm shooting something black, when I had the flash on and took a test shot, I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised with, well, actually, maybe not. It looks pretty flashy, but you know, here you go. So I'm going to turn that back off, and it shows that it's off in the top by having that little slash through on it. Okay. All right, so the next up guy, is this little kind of bullseye looking icon. It's got this dotted ring around the outside. This also has like a slash through on it because I keep it off. This is your live photo option, like toggle to turn it on or off. If I tap this, it turns yellow. I get a little flash of a live badge that comes on, and then it goes away, and then that icon just stays yellow at the top, indicating that it's on. What a live photo does, and I think it's on by default on phones, so you have to kind of turn it off on purpose. It does that little video thing where it almost turns your photos into GIFs so that you get a little bit of video and a little bit of motion in there. And to show you what I mean, I'm just going to really quickly open up my Photos app. My Photos app. And I'm going to come here to Live Photos just to show you an example. So this is a live photo of my sister and her husband and my nephew. And if I push on my camera screen, my phone screen, excuse me, it will bring up that little bit of video, right? And if you look at the left hand side of the screen in the white underneath the blue arrow, it has this little gray text that says live. That's just telling me that this is a live photo. And we'll talk more about how to edit these and turn live photos into still photos when we get into the Photos app, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. And I keep this off in my settings because when you are doing live photos, because there's video embedded, it takes up more space. And again, there are instances where live photos are super handy, like when you're photographing something moving, like a baby or a dog, or I don't know, you name it. I love using live photos at the beach, or on a windy day, or for kind of various things. Photographs of water, you can make some really cool effects using live photos, and we'll talk about that. But generally speaking, I keep it off because I just want my photos to be photos, and I don't want it to take up extra space. And every time I push my button, I don't want to have to be worrying about the video capture, because if you guys have ever taken one of these accidentally, you'll know that we tend to, as human beings, take a picture and then immediately put our phone down. Well, that action of putting our phone down a lot of times gets captured by the live photo. So you have this kind of like, I don't know, it almost looks like you're in an earthquake or something. So I keep it off. So my personal preference. There you go. And we will kind of revisit live photos. I'm sure I'm going to do a little Q&A, question section right before we switch over to editing. So if you guys have questions about live photos and you want me to go into it in a little bit more detail, we can do that then. Just because a lot of people tend to have photos about this, or have questions about live photos. So I want to make sure that we can cover that for you if you want. Okay, so the next option next to live photos, so we're at the third icon on the screen, is our timer, self-timer option. So this is by default set to off, and then you have a 3-second self-timer so that when you push the shutter, it'll count down 3 seconds and then take your photo. And then you have your 10-second self-timer so that when you push your shutter button, you'll get a 10-second countdown, and then it will take your photo. This is, a lot of people ask me why the 3-second option is there. The 3-second option is actually really useful if you are taking a picture in low light situations and you don't want to use a flash, and you have your kind of phone propped up using either a stand or a tripod so that you can do like long exposure stuff, so that your phone has a time to settle where you're not touching it before it takes the exposure. So for things like macro or long exposure stuff, product photography in low light, this is a super helpful feature, and I'm a big fan of it. The 10-second one is more for your kind of standard group portraits or things like that where you're trying to run into the frame, or doing really fancy selfies where you have to kind of get into a pose or something like that. That would be your kind of use for the 10-second feature. This is one of probably my least used features on the camera app, but it is very handy when you do need it. So it's kind of one of those ones that you're not going to use very often, but it's there for you if you need it. All right, so our final kind of icon on the top of the screen is your filters icon. And this one, so I've just tapped on it. And what happened is you can, when you tap on it, the screen lifts up and you get a little kind of film strip at the bottom. And if I swipe on that film strip, it shows me different live filters for kind of color and tone and things like that. So this is like Instagram filters built into your camera. And you've got a couple of black and white options. Now, the cool thing about this is I can set one of these and then I can either tap on the filters button again, and it will kind of minimize those options, and then it will keep that filter applied as I take pictures, so that you get a little preview. And because it's Apple and because they're cool, if you don't like whatever filter you've chosen, you can go back and remove it after the fact, which is really super handy. I don't know about you guys, but I use this one a lot because I can't pre-visualize things. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but sometimes my brain works better in color. So sometimes if I'm trying to figure out if something's going to look good in black and white, I can't really pre-visualize what that is going to do. So I'll come and choose one of these black and white filters, and that will help me kind of arrange my scene and take my photos how I want them. And I can take them in black and white and then go back and turn them back into color if I want to. One other thing that I want to kind of point out while we're here is that when you have a filter applied that's not obvious, like one of the color ones, one of the color options, where you might forget that it's on, as long as you have a filter applied in the camera, that icon in the top right hand corner is going to be colored in. So you're going to get the red, green, and blue icon instead of when you have it set to basic or no filter applied, that icon is going to be grayscale. So you'll have grayscale. So you have that kind of visual reminder that you're using a filter. You can also, because I don't know, they're shortcuts. You can also cut. Oh, let me take a picture and get that to go away. Will you go away? Yeah. If I place my finger on the screen, so like over the preview of where the image is, what I'm taking a picture of, and just swipe up really fast, that also brings up the filters rather than tapping the icon. So I can also swipe up and down on the kind of image preview in the center and access the filters that way. I hope that makes sense. All right. So going clockwise, we are now heading down to the bottom. So the first kind of icon on the bottom right-hand side of the screen is it's the camera with the little kind of circle arrows in it. I hope most of you know what that one is. That one is your selfie camera so that you can take selfies. I don't know if you know this or not, but when you are taking selfies, the camera in the front of your phone is not as good as the camera on the back side of your phone. So when you're taking selfies, just know that the resolution, there's not as many megapixels on the back camera, or excuse me, on the selfie camera versus the back-facing camera, the one on the back. They just can't fit as many megapixels on this side and have it kind of nestle into the screen as nicely. So just know that if you need to get a good resolution image of something, the selfie camera might not be the answer, and use the other side if you need to. So that's kind of how you flip back and forth to the selfie situation. Now, the next one in the middle, I hope you all know what that one is. That's the shutter button. So if I push that, it takes a picture. If you don't know about this, or if you've accidentally done it, if I push and hold on the shutter button, you see that little counter that's up to, I don't know, in the 30s now? That is a burst mode. So it is going to take pictures as long as you're pushing down that shutter. This is a handy thing if you're trying to photograph kids or dogs or things that move fast, so that one of those photos in there will be a keeper. And we'll talk about kind of choosing and narrowing down from burst mode, because I guarantee you probably don't want to have 30 of the same kind of photo stuck on your phone taking up space. So there's a way to kind of weed out your burst photos um, on the Photos app. Yeah. Fun thing. I don't know. I'm just gonna stop the share for just a second so that you can see my face for just a minute. So hopefully you guys can see me. I'm going to take my phone off of this doodad so I can bring it around here. Um, in addition to pushing the shutter button to take a picture, this one kind of blows people's minds a little bit. The volume buttons on the side of your phone are also shutters when you're in the camera app. So if you are in the camera app, you can hold your phone kind of like a regular camera and push the volume up or down, it doesn't matter, and it will take a photo for you. So I can do that, and for photographers, people doing, I don't know, for me anyways, I like having the physical button that I can push, and when you're holding things like this, it kind of falls really naturally under my shutter finger, so that's nice. It's also helpful for selfies. So if you're taking a selfie, you can just kind of push with your finger here instead of having to try and reach a finger around here to do that. That one is pro tip of the day. Also, I'm gonna put my phone back. Hold on just a second. Let me get that back up on its little tripod. And just so you know, keeping my phone steady is a little tripod on a mount. I will send you guys a follow-up email after this is over with a link to some of my favorite little iPhone things like a tripod and a tripod mount that are cheap. So I'll show you that. You guys have a set of these, right, that came with your phone. So headphones, corded headphones. If you plug these into your phone, the volume buttons on here, and I don't know if it works for third-party ones, so you guys will, if you have like a pair of really nice headphones that aren't Apple branded, if you push the volume button on this while it's plugged into your phone, it will act as a shutter as well. So if you are doing some low light photography stuff, or you need to reduce camera shake, or you need to get your hand really far out for a really great selfie, you can use your headphones as a shutter release. So that's also really cool, and one of my favorite little secret tips. Okay, cool. So those are my shutter pro tips. I'm going to switch back over to to my phone screen so you guys can see that. While I'm doing that, how's everybody feeling? You guys still hanging in there with me? Feeling good? Okay. Cool. Perfect. Also, give me a quick thumbs up and let me know that you guys can see the screen again. Nice. Great. Okay, so that is your kind of shutter features. And then next to the shutter button, so far left, you've got this little square that usually has a photo in it, right? This is your quick access to your Photos app. So if I tap on this, it is going to open the last photo that I took in my Photos app so that I can kind of quickly go and see a preview of the last photo that I took in my camera. Now, I can also get back to my camera really easily. So if I look at the top left of my screen, right under where the time is, there is a little kind of left facing triangle. If I tap on that, it will bring me directly back into the camera. So that's a really nice way for you to be able to kind of get back and forth, right? Okay. Couple of other things that I want to talk about quickly before we get into editing photos, which is kind of where a lot of the magic happens, are just your little shooting modes that are available to you in the camera app. So if we look above our shutter button, there's some text, and again, whatever is yellow is what's active. So we're in photo mode where we're taking still photographs. If I put my finger over the word photo and swipe towards the right, it switches me over into video mode where I can take a video. If I swipe again, it takes me into slow-mo mode where I can take slow motion videos. And if I swipe again, it will take me into time-lapse mode, which is another video mode. And I'm just going to show you quickly some examples of these because I feel like that's the best way to describe these things. And one caveat with these two options, time-lapse mode and slow-mo video. You have to record your video with these options for your videos to have the kind of end result look. You can't kind of shoot a regular video and then turn it into time lapse on the Apple phone or turn it into a slow-mo in the Apple phone. That's just kind of the rules. Them's the rules, kids. So I'm going to come back into my Photos app. We'll discuss this in a little bit more detail in a minute, but I'm just going to go to time lapse where it keeps all of my time lapse stuff. So time lapse, essentially what it does is it takes video in kind of intervals. It's almost like taking photos in intervals. This is me setting up in the studio for a session. And it basically, for as long as you have it running, this maybe was 30, 45 minutes in real time. And it ends up being, I don't know, less than 2 minutes of video, maybe a minute and a half of video, something like that. So that is what slow-mo looks like. And you can do this for multiple different things. It's really kind of cool for putting something together or building something or taking something apart. This is a fruit tart that I made, and sorry if you're hungry now, I apologize. So that's the time-lapse mode. You do have to have, for a time-lapse video to really work, you do have to have a stand or a tripod or some stable place to put the phone while it's recording the base video. So that's a thing. And this is slow-mo. What this does is it records video in kind of standard speed, and then it will slow down a portion of it. And you can choose in post-processing what's going to get slowed down. So you can do things like, I don't know, these are my, vicious dogs that are not trying to actually kill each other, but it kind of looks like it in slow-mo. So there are obviously all kinds of different things that you can do with that, but that's kind of the gist. So moving on. This one, the portrait mode. So this is if you have a newer phone that's got the dual cameras on the other side, so you've got the two kind of cameras available to you. You have portrait mode. And what portrait mode does is it kind of uses both of the telephoto camera and the kind of wide angle camera in conjunction, along with algorithms and super smart programs to create a faux depth of field so that it looks like you were using a high-end DSLR and blurring out the background and creating that bokeh effect. Now, I tend to still think that the technology for this is not as great as it could be. So I don't tend to use this for the bokeh effects as much as I use it for some other things. One thing that I do want to point out is, do you see over the word portrait at the bottom of our little preview, you've got this little kind of cube with a light in it? If I tap on this, it kind of activates and lets me swipe through. there are different, these are fake pro lighting effects. And as a pro photographer, I will tell you that on some of them, they kind of messed up with how this works. It just doesn't translate super well. And I'm actually going to turn this around to selfie mode because it's not, it kind of needs to see a face for it to work. So here's me. One thing about portrait mode, do you see, I have kind of frizzy hair. Do you see how it's trying to blur out the background and it's kind of creating this like fake halo situation where it doesn't recognize the frizzier parts of my hair? And I get this weird kind of edge situation. This is one of the main reasons why I don't necessarily love portrait mode on this whole sitch. But here's the lighting effects. This is natural light where it's not really affecting the lighting. Studio light just does a little bit of kind of overall brightening, and I think it looks kind of like it's adding some like skin smoothing situation. So if you want to kind of Facetune yourself, this is your jam. It is probably the only lighting effect in this whole thing that I think is maybe worth anything, is the studio lighting one. Just my 2 cents. Contour lighting, a lot of the times, so if I switch back and forth so you can see the difference, it's trying to create like a strip of light here and darken like the edges of my face. And I think most of the time it just ends up looking kind of muddy as opposed to useful. Again, 2 cents. Stage light is trying to turn my background black. And again, with frizzy hair, it does not necessarily work very well. So yeah. Stage lighting mono is same thing, only black and white, but with a black background. And then high key mono is same thing, but with a white background, which tends to look a little better, but still not great. So yeah, so that is the portrait mode overview. I will talk a little bit more about how to modify things taken in portrait mode, because you can actually change it in editing after the fact, and that's really helpful. So you can shoot in portrait mode and then kind of change it to where these little fuzzy frizzy things go away, and you're still using the kind of depth of field cameras and things like that. So that's, I mean, it's actually kind of cool. So that's portrait mode. So now I'm going to switch back away from me and go back to Barb and my camera. So if I swipe again to the other side, I have my square camera, which is literally built for Instagram. And yeah, so if you want to take a photo in a square format, you can. Caveat about this is a thing. If you take a photo in square, you are cutting out, so this is your standard photo. Look at how much like room there is at the top of the bottom versus square. You are pre-cropping your photo and losing that information, and you can't get it back. I would, if you ever want to maybe crop a photo, take it in full size first, and then we'll crop it later, and I will show you how to do that. So there you go. And then our final kind of photography option is pano. And pano is really cool if you know how to do it. So I'm gonna hopefully not give you guys motion sickness. I'm gonna take this off and I'm gonna show you guys how this works. So basically, you can see my setup a little bit. So basically what we're doing and how this works is you've got this little guide in the middle of the screen. So you've got a little preview of how everything is set up, and you've got this little thumbnail and an arrow, and you have to push the shutter to activate it. So I'm pushing the shutter and see now how it goes to a little stop icon. And I'm having to move the camera, and I'm just moving it to the right, and you can see my studio. And the idea is to keep the arrow on the yellow line. And now, ooh, I really went off of it there. And whenever you want to stop, you just put the little stop button. And now if I go here, I have this panorama. of whatever's going on. But do you see what happened? Do you see what happened, guys? Like, can you see the little wiggle in the kind of in the iPad screen, and like where my water bottle is on the table where I kind of jiggled? So this takes some practice, but it is really helpful, especially if you are I use this a lot for interiors when I'm photographing interior spaces and it's kind of a tight spot and I need to get a lot of information in. I will take a pano. I'll take a little panorama so that I can get kind of like the whole room in. So for Lamari, who's doing kind of party decor, if you're in a tight spot and you can't quite fit everything into a photo, try doing a little panorama. I find that to be very helpful and kind of shows more of the space and what you've kind of done with the space. So that's really cool. And I'm gonna go back to my thing, and I also want to show you guys this thing. If I turn it horizontally, so I've just basically turned it the other way, I can actually take a vertical panorama. So if I start, I can just kind of scooch up. And so this would be cool if you're like photographing a tall building or a room with really high ceilings, or you name it, different, cool different things. So panorama is really useful, not just for landscapes. So yeah. Oh, another quick tip about the panorama. If you don't want to go left to right, if you tap on the arrow, it will switch and you can go right to left, or I don't know if you'd want to go up to down, but you might be able to. There you go. All right, so I'm going to come back over here to photo, and I'm going to kind of open up my chat box again. And if you guys want to either unmute yourselves, or kind of get back in here, I will answer any kind of quick questions that you guys have about what we're doing. And where's my chat box? Where did you go? There we are. Okay, I have my chat box back up. Yeah, so if you guys want to ask any questions about what we went over in the camera app before we move over to doing some edits, I'm happy to answer those for you. Did you have a question, Gretchen? I can't hear
you. No, I just unmuted in case. Because I do.
Okay.
So, not yet.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right, so if everybody's good, no questions, because I don't want to keep you guys too terribly much longer. The editing bit hopefully will not take quite as long. So yeah, so we'll get through that. All right, Gretchen, don't be offended. I'm going to put you on mute because I'm getting a little bit of feedback in my headphones from your thing. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to come back over here to my screen, and I'm going to open up my Photos app. Now, I normally kind of get a little bit more into organizing your photos in the Photos app, but I'm not going to do that today because we ain't got time for that. But quick. If you look at the bottom of your screen in the Photos app, you've got some tabs. So you have a general photos at the far left, which is organized by time. So days, months, and years. And I've been taking BT dubs over quarantine sessions. I've been taking a whole lot of selfies and texting it to people, just so that they don't forget what I look like. So I've got a lot of selfies in my feed currently. So if you like things to be organized by time, you will enjoy the Photos tab. The For You tab is kind of Apple created algorithmically based on kind of places or events or stuff like this. So it's got all this memories business. I really don't mess with this. I just don't. It's not, again, I'm a control freak. Apple does this for me. I have no control over it, so I don't mess with it. And the one that I use the most is this albums tab, because this is where I can organize photos myself and access things in a way that makes sense. A couple of things that I do want to point out about the albums tab is if you come here and then you scroll up, you have this media types section. And each one of these media types corresponds to a kind of shooting mode. So you'll see that there's a panoramas tab. So if I tap on this, you will have like different panoramas in there. I've got my time lapse tab where I keep all the videos that I've taken in the time lapse mode go there. And if you are a screenshot crazy person like I am, your screenshots get saved in one place, which is super handy. Anything taken in portrait mode is in one place. Your live photos, where you've got that little bit of video business, is all in one place, which I love that I can kind of go and sort by type of photo. So that's really useful for me. And while we're here, I'm going to show you some kind of editing bonus features in live mode. So I'm just going to come back here to this photo of my sister and my nephew and my brother-in-law. And when you have a photo that's taken in live mode, if you place your finger one on the photo, you can swipe up and you get this little effects bar that pops up right underneath the photo where it says live, loop, bounce, or long exposure. So loop basically loops the video portion, so it kind of keeps playing. Bounce is like a boomerang, so it kind of goes back and forth, right? Ooh, no, I don't want to keep it on that. So swipe up again. Long exposure, anything that's moving like gets blurred, which for this particular photo, not the greatest. But the long exposure option is super cool for things like water, where you can blur like a waterfall and make it look like that like silky ribbon pro photographer situation. And you can also do it for, you know, other different things, which I find to be super helpful. Now, here's a cool bit with this that I find to be really handy. And we're going to kind of get into edit features for regular photos a little bit later. But if I look at the top right-hand portion of my screen, you've got that blue edit button. This is where we're going to be spending a lot of time. I'm going to click on that. And I will have in the bottom of my screen, I have, do you see the little the live photos icon? So I've got the little kind of, I've got the little bullseye icon. If I tap on this, I can then scrub through the video with my finger and pick which portion of this video I want to be like the still. So clearly, my nephew Finn is not looking fantastic in a lot of this, but this is kind of decent. I can also, on the top of my screen, turn the volume off if it recorded any sound. So I can turn off any sound associated with this video. So if I do keep it as a video, it won't play sound. And I have the little live badge at the top, right? And if I tap on that, it turns it into a still photo based on the little section of video that I chose in the little film strip on the bottom, and I can click on done. And now this is a regular photo. And if I look in the top kind of corner underneath the little back arrow, the live now has a slash through it. And it's not like, if I push my finger on this, it's not going to play any video because the video is not, I mean, it's still there because it's Apple, so I can revert it back to the video thing, but it's not showing video, which is kind of cool. So that is some quick pro editing tips for live photos if you've been taking live photos. So now I'm going to come back up here, and I created a little folder in my albums for the iPhone class for photos to edit. And I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to grab this photo of Little Dipper's little ice cream shop in Bailey Park, which I don't know when that's going to open back up, but I'm excited for it. So I have this photo, and if you want to edit a photo, you have to open it up big. So you have to take it from the grid view and then tap it to view it full screen. And then in the top right hand corner underneath your kind of battery and Wi-Fi and stuff, you have the blue edit button. If I tap on this, and again, if you are not on iOS 13, this will look different. And I recommend really strongly that you update to iOS 13 because the new editing features in this are bomb. I mean, they're really good. I have not been editing my photos in other apps as much since the update. So if you haven't done it, do it because it's totally worth it. So here's how this works. We have along the bottom, you've got a little auto magic wand icon. And if I tap on this, it is going to automatically do an edit on my photo. If I tap on it again, it goes back to normal. If I tap on it again, you can see the little auto edit. I don't think I have to say this by now, but I'm a control freak and I want to do it myself. I'm just not gonna do the magic wand situation. So to edit this by myself, what you do is all of these little kind of circles are editing functions. So if I if I put my finger on the wand and pull to the left, it's going to swipe over to the exposure option. And you've got these little tick marks on the bottom. So if I put my finger over those tick marks and swipe one way, it's going to darken. And if I swipe the other way, it's going to brighten. Now here's the thing about exposure. Your exposure control is global. It brightens and darkens everything at the same rate. So a lot of the times I will not use exposure unless my photo is very, very dark or very, very bright. I tend to want to use different controls to brighten or darken my image because usually things in the image need to be darkened and lightened in different, in different areas. So brilliance is an algorithm-based editor. So if you are using brilliance, it is going to kind of brighten your shadows, kind of keep your highlights in line, boost your colors, and add a little bit of that kind of crisp sharpness to your image. It's kind of a really great kind of overall thing, but I think it looks really good on images like this where it's a landscape or an urban scene or something like that. When you kind of use brilliance real insane on portraits, it doesn't look so great because that clarity, that kind of like crisp sharpness happens in hair and on skin, and it will bring out any lines or wrinkles or like hair texture or anything crazy like that. So use that one sparingly. Highlights is going to help brighten or bring down any kind of highlight areas. And this is how I edit my photos, guys. I just kind of like swipe back and forth in different tools and see what looks good. I do like this lifting the shadows situation, so I'm going to do that right about there. Contrast, the way contrast works, contrast at the same time, so when you increase contrast, it brightens the brights and darkens the darks and kind of leaves the middle tones alone, the mid-tones alone. I don't know what it is lately about me and editing, but in the last couple of months, I have been, instead of increasing contrast, I've been decreasing it, and that is just my own personal style. So You do whatever speaks to you and whatever works best for the image. But I've noticed myself lately kind of doing less contrast instead of more. Brightness. So brightness is different from exposure in that it tries to preserve your highlights and only kind of brighten your midtones and your shadows, but really does it so that everything kind of reaches the same kind of brightness level. You're not kind of globally darkening everything. So if you have a photo that looks or feels a little dark, I tend to like to use the brightness slider over the exposure slider. I feel like you get a better result. Black point. Do you know those trendy photos that have that kind of matte look? I don't know. Black point is where you get that. So if you take your black point to the negative side, it will give you that kind of matte, low contrast look that's very kind of trendy. And then if you go the other way, it's just going to take all of your blacks and your darkest bits and really darken them. I tend to not mess with black point too much. That's just a kind of personal thing. Saturation is kind of like exposure for color. It is a global change. It increases or decreases color the same amount across the board. So if I increase my saturation, all of my colors are getting increased at the same level at the same time. Same thing for desaturation. So if I go all the way to negative 100 on saturation, it takes every little bit of color out of the image. This photo actually looks good with the saturation boosted. So I'm gonna, I don't know, come right around here. The difference between saturation and this next option, which is vibrance, is this one was built for portraits. It preserves kind of the middle colors and boosts colors like blues get boosted, greens get boosted, and your kind of oranges and reds are preserved, so that you can boost kind of colors in portraits and it's not going to make people look like Oompa Loompas. So this one is a nice option if you want your colors to look a little bit more natural. I'm a big fan of the vibrance slider. Our next editing option is the warmth option or temperature option. So if I swipe one direction, it's going to add more yellow to the image. And if I swipe in the other direction, it is going to add more blue. This photo I think looks really good with more yellow added. Shadow areas when you're outside shooting tend to photograph more cool. So I tend to add a little bit of warmth for things like that. Our next option is tint. So if I go one way, it's going to add more magenta to the image, and if I go the other, it's going to add a little bit more green. This one I don't use as much. I feel like your tint in cell phone photography tends to not be an issue. So that's one that I tend to not mess with as much. Our next option is sharpness. This one is going to add sharpness to your photo. You can only go one direction. You can only increase sharpness. You can't kind of take it out. And when I max this out, I want you to look at the umbrellas and the kind of spines of the umbrellas. Do you see how it's created this halo? And it's created this kind of like white halo around the power lines as well. This is bad sharpening. Don't do it. So anytime you see those halos start to pop up, you know you've gone too far. So if you want to add kind of a sharpening effect, I tend to keep my sharpening like at least under 20, and especially on portraits. You can kind of go a little bit farther with sharpening on landscapes, but on people, again, it will bring out any line, any wrinkle, any kind of skin texture. Hair starts to do funky things. Definition is kind of like sharpness, but there's a little bit more algorithmic zhuzhing. So you can see if I boost the definition to 100, it's not giving me halos around the umbrella spines or around the power lines, and really only kind of making things like the sidewalk looks really kind of gritty, and like the leaves on the trees have got definition, the bricks have got more definition. Again, this is one of those ones that is kind of computer AI based and looks real good on photographs like this, not so good on portraits. So there you go. Next up, we've got noise reduction. So if you're photographing in low light and you get some of that digital noise in your photos, this will kind of help to smooth that out. I don't have any of that in this photo, so I'm not really gonna, well, I mean, we can see what happens. Why not? Yeah, it's not, the only thing it's doing is you can see in the leaves, it's kind of, those look more kind of blobby, and they have kind of a softer edge because it thinks that that's noise. It's reading that as digital noise. You can go too far with noise reduction and have things like skin look plastic, or things that should have some kind of texture like a sidewalk or something like that, a wall, can just look flat and plastic and unnatural. So be careful with the noise reduction. Here's one that I really like, and this is the vignette. So if I go in one direction with the vignette, it darkens the edges and gives you this kind of like tunnel effect. And what this does for photography is it draws your eye to the center of the frame, and in kind of like a not distracting way. If I go the other way with the vignette, it adds like a white vignette instead of a black one. A little less used is the white vignette, but I usually like to add, especially on a photo like this, where I'm kind of looking down a perspective. I like to darken the edges a little bit more so you really get kind of drawn into the center of the image. Here's a fun thing. This is one of my favorite things of all time because I kind of like to see where I've started versus where I've gotten. So if you tap your finger on the image in this edit screen, you can see the before and then the after. So you can see this is my before, and then we're coming to, oh, and then it will switch back kind of after a second to after. So I can see where we started versus where we've ended up. It's pretty good. So those are all of your editing tools for kind of doing color and whatnots. I really, really enjoy these. A couple of other things. This photo, I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Again, it's back to my I cannot take a straight photo to save my life. On the bottom of our screen, we've got these three little buttons. You've got like this knobby button that has a yellow kind of circle underneath it. You've got your filters icon, and then you've got this crop icon. If I tap on the crop icon, it changes me over into this crop interface. And the first option that we have to do is it defaults us into a straightening option. So these little tick marks now where I can slide back and forth are a straightener. So I can, and it pops up as I'm straightening these handy dandy little grid lines. So I can line up the edge of that building and that power pole, light pole situation, so that it doesn't look like we're tilting off the edge of the world, and I can straighten that out. One other thing that I want to point out is if I click on these two other options next to the straighten option, these control your skew, your vertical skew and your horizontal skew. So for things like this, like an interior and exterior of a building, if I then swipe, this corrects for what's called keystoning, where you're tilting your camera when you're taking the picture and creating this kind of keystone effect where kind of buildings kind of get smaller as they get farther away and things like that. So these are really good kind of controls to use when you are photographing buildings and whatnot to correct for keystoning and holding your phone wonky when you're trying to take photographs of things that should be perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. You should be able to kind of play around and get a feel for it. The other thing that I want to point out in this screen, if we go up to the top, if we look at the top of the screen, you have got you've got a reset button if you want to reset your crop if you've gotten a little too crazy with it. And then right to the right of that, you've got these little looks like kind of like nested squares or like a Mondrian painting. If we tap on this, this changes and opens up your crop ratio section where you can choose how you crop the image. So your default is to a free-form crop, where if I grab one of these corners, I can kind of make this any size or orientation that I want to. That's free-form. Okay. I also have these other these options. So above the text, do you see how there's one that's taller and one that's wider? This switches us between portrait and landscape mode. And then if I swipe these other ways, I can choose between your standard kind of crop ratios. So we've got a square, we have an 8x10, and I can then switch it between 8x10 horizontal or 8x10 vertical. Got a 5x7. Again, I can switch between horizontal and vertical. And if I want to reposition, I can just tap my finger on the image and kind of squoosh this around and put whatever I want in the middle. 2:3 is your kind of standard DSLR crop ratio. So what natively comes out of a DSLR camera is this 2:3. Yeah, so 9x16 is kind of like a panorama, and then iPhone, like it's the kind of native aspect of your iPhone. And then you can go back to original or freeform, and freeform just kind of lets you do whatever you want. So that is super handy if you need to crop a photo for a specific size for a print or something like that. So if we're talking about photo prints, your 8x10 obviously corresponds to an 8x10 size photo print. Your 5x7 corresponds to a 5x7 photo print. And just so you know, the 2x3 corresponds to a 4x6 physical print size. So if you wanted to print something as a 4x6, it would be the 2:3 ratio. So that's that. And then if you liked those filters from the camera mode, we also have access to those same filters here in, the vivid warm, y'all, that looks good. So we can kind of test these out on this. I really like the vivid warm. And if we think that one of these filters is a little too much, I've got actually a slider on the bottom where I can reduce, I can add just a little bit, or I can add it at like maxed out. I think maybe right around there. I'm feeling that. So I can click, so I can do a before and I can do an after. It's looking really good. So if we're done, just click on done, the yellow done button, the bottom of the screen, and now we're back in our Photos app with the edit that we have created. And this is how it will preview now in your grid and in your thing. And now we can text it or put it on Instagram or do whatever we want to do with it. If we decide that we do not like this edit and we want to start over, you have to click on the edit button again. And then the done button has now in the bottom right hand corner gone to a revert button. So if I want to take all of these edits out and start over, I can go to revert and it will take it back to how I took it in my iPhone. Cool? All right. Wow, I feel like I powered through that. Are you guys feeling good? Like, does that make sense to you? Follow along okay? Awesome. Thanks, Lena. Okay, so I think that's it for this. The only other thing that I want to show you is if you are using that portrait mode, I want to show you how you can edit those in this photos app situation because I can. So this is a photo, a selfie that I took at the Sawtooth back when I could be at the Sawtooth. And I did it in portrait mode. So you can tell that it's in portrait mode if I look underneath the kind of on the left hand top of the screen. I've got that little cube icon and the word portrait. So it's telling me that it's in portrait. Now, when I click on the edit button here, I've got the yellow portrait badge that shows up at the top, and then I have the little cube icon on the bottom showing me like all of the features that I've got going on. And this one's important that I want to point out. To the left of the word portrait, that yellow badge icon, is this F4.5. If I tap on this, this is one that doesn't want to activate easily, so I'm having to like tap it a couple of times to try and get it to, there we go, to get it to do. I think it's just because it's too far to the edge of the screen. But now, do you see how this opened up this depth slider at the bottom? I can now swipe and really fuzz out the background and part of my hair, to be honest, a lot of my hair actually. And I can take it all the way to where everything in the background is sharp. So kind of your standard situation. And you can swipe around and kind of see where things start to look really bad or things are okay. You can see that I've kind of landed on the 4x5 is still kind of pushing it. I feel like the edge, the kind of left hand edge of my hair is starting to look a little messed with. But you know, right around, if I push it much fuzzier than the 4x5, I can personally tell that it's been messed with digitally. So I'm gonna keep it kind of right around here so that it still gives me a blurry background, but it's not as obvious that it's been kind of messed with. And I can also tap on this little cube option. Oh, I think I have to tap on the little yellow F icon on the top to kind of switch out of that. Yep. And now I can also come back here and change the lighting bits. Oh my gosh, you guys, these are so bad. Like, it's so bad. Anyway, there you go. I tend to, one of these days I might get it right, maybe. But for now, I feel like my job as a lighting expert is still safe. The iPhone hasn't completely taken it from me yet. But that's how you can change those after the fact and kind of edit your portrait mode photos after the fact. If you've done something as you're taking it that you might want to tweak later, you can always come here and do that. And then again, if you want to access your regular editing controls, on the bottom of the screen next to that cube is this little knob. If I click on the knob, this gives me access to all of my fun little, ooh, no, Lord, no, to all of my different editing options here. So I can kind of start swiping around and change it. Oh, no. This is literally how I edit my photos, guys. I just kind of like swipe back and forth to where it looks good to me. And I do a lot of this, no, that looks terrible situation. Give myself a little bit of a tan, a little smoosh of warmth. I'm not very tan in real life. It's true. Ooh, so this is one instance where the tint actually kind of looks good. Because there's that red wall in the background. My camera has decided that maybe there's too much red in the image, so it's kind of trying to knock it down and compensate for that to neutralize any color cast. And if I add a little bit more magenta into this photo and increase the tint, it makes my skin look a little bit more natural and a little less like sallow. So that actually is one that's not bad. So this is before and that's an after. So it's subtle. Like subtle edits for portraits anyways. I always feel like if you're working with people, less is sometimes more. And just to show you, I'm going to come into like our sharpening. See how it really makes my hair look crazy when you over sharpen stuff like that. Just don't do it. And then definition. Oh, definition's not so bad. See, I'm surprised. It works much better than sharpening on a portrait. It's not, it doesn't look like it's messing with my skin too much. Oh, and I just so you guys know what I just did there. I just did the pinch and zoom thing on the the photo and brought more of my face up so that I can actually move the slider with more on the screen so I can see how it's affecting different parts of the image. And it looks like it is really affecting the darker areas and kind of leaving my overall skin alone, which is good. I did not realize that that's what that was doing. So I learned something today too. So definition you can use on portraits and not look terrible. It made my lashes look really great. Noise reduction, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of noise there, so I'm going to leave that. And then, of course, my little vignette. I like a vignette. So here we go. So this is our before, and there's our after. Not bad. I'm going to click on done, and there we go. New profile picture for Twitter. All right, so I'm going to, again, kind of come back and open this up for questions. I hope this was helpful for everyone, and I appreciate you guys so much for being my little guinea pigs today. I will, hopefully the recording worked, and I'll be able to post a recording of this so you guys can watch it back. But yeah, I'm gonna switch back over here to my video. And if you guys want to unmute or type in the chat box and let me know like how you guys are feeling, or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions for you today. Also, since this went, I don't know, I think it went well, you guys will have to let me know. I will send out a follow-up email with a little kind of questionnaire, just kind of to get some feedback on, since this is my first time doing this, I'd want to know your thoughts about it and how to improve it. When I have taught this in person, there's always been a second follow-up class that is app-based, where I'm showing you guys my favorite third-party editing apps, and I would love to be able to do that kind of as my next class, as well as maybe a product photography class in the works. So yeah, I've definitely, one of the ideas for classes that I think will work is the product photography class. And then also the kind of part 2 of this where I'm showing you guys my favorite third-party editing apps. So I will send out an email with a little questionnaire for you guys to fill out, a link for the video if it actually recorded so you guys can watch this back. And yeah, if you need to reach me, or if you have any questions about any of this stuff after this is over, please feel free to get in touch and DM me on Instagram, or do any kind of uh, email. You can email me back from the email that you get and all that good stuff. So, one quick thing, because these are uncertain times and technically I'm unemployed right now. This is a free class, but if you have learned anything that's useful to you, I have included some links here if you want to buy me a coffee, or, well, when I can actually go out for coffee again. Uh, that would be amazing. Again, no obligation. I kind of like internally feel a little guilty even mentioning it, but I would like to be able to continue offering classes for you know, if not free, very affordable kind of options going forward. And I will ask you for your feedback um, on that, like what you might want to uh, pay for something similar to this going forward, depending on how long this goes. So, thank you guys again so much for coming today and giving me your time. I really do appreciate it. I hope you've learned some things to help you today. And I have a hashtag set up that is uh, I'm going to type it in the little chat box. It's just KDP iPhone. So if you want to, oh, sorry, I actually just sent that not to everyone, but to Gretchen. My bad. I'm going to just put this in for everyone again. KDP iPhone. Yeah, so if you want to share your photos on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that, tag it with KDP iPhone, and I will reshare them on Instagram, or you know, like them, leave some comments and that sort of thing. So uh, I again thank you so much. I'll be posting more on Instagram about future classes. I have your email addresses, so I will send you information about upcoming classes, and I hope to see you again soon. So thank you guys. Man, I actually did that in the time allotted. I'm surprised. Thank you guys again all so much. I'm going to sign off here, and I hope to see you again soon. So thank you.